Howdy.
Wow.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Batfeed, your source for Batman news, lore, and so much more. I've got my friend Noah here today, and we're going to be talking about our upcoming stop motion project and a little bit of news on the Snyder Cut that's coming out next year, 2021. You were just telling me, Noah, that you didn't know that it was coming out, A, and then B, you don't know too much about it yet, so.
Yeah. I am very curious because I didn't know much about it, and then once we decided to make a little video on this, I decided to not do much research myself because I wanted to stay kind of able to ask you questions and that kind of stuff. So how long ago was it now that Justice League originally came out?
I actually, I was just talking with Kate, my fiance, about this because we were trying to piece together the timeline of when it all came out because it was really confusing. I think it came out, it was November 2017 because it came out on
Okay.
DVD the following March. So,
Okay, there we
so
go.
it's
Yeah.
been, by the time it comes out, it'll have been 4 years.
Yeah, dang. So yeah, like how different is what's coming out from the original movie that we saw in theaters?
Yeah, so I don't know if I've told you about like how this news was released. I logged onto Instagram one day and all my news feed was HBO Max, Justice League, Zack Snyder, Justice League. And I was just like, is this for real or is this just more fan art? Because there's been a ton of fan art out there. And sure enough, I go in and there'd been a Man of Steel watch party with Zack Snyder on I think it was on Vero, which is like a somewhat
Hmm.
obscure social media platform, and he did a Man of Steel watch party. They got through the whole movie. He was kind of like giving commentary and answering questions, and then at the very end they did a Q&A, and Henry Cavill just kind of like appeared all of a sudden, like he was logged into that, and they answered a few questions, and then somebody asked about the Snyder Cut because they've been pushing for it so much, and Zach was like, well, it would be easier to just show you. Flips his screen, and there's the poster for the Snyder Cut.
Whoa.
Pretty dramatic. I think HBO even put out a trailer about that whole thing with all those clips of those questions and stuff. Yeah, and
Nice.
one of the big questions was like, just how drastically different is it going to be from the original? And he said like essentially it's going to be almost unrecognizable from the original one that came out in theaters.
Wow.
They just did such extensive reshoots once he wasn't attached to the project anymore. Basically, it's going to be his vision for what it should have looked like, and I think he even said he's going to tweak it too based off of how fans reacted to certain things in the one that did come out.
Yeah, that's exciting because I remember when it came out, there was a lot of kind of mixed feelings about it, but the kind of general consensus was like, all right, like that was kind of cool, but it was a little bit pieced together and it was a little bit kind of shaky. So I'm excited to see, yeah, what's different because I know about the fact that there were reshoots. There's some kind of funny memes and videos about the fact that Henry Cavill had a mustache for this one thing and they had to reshoot it and like CG his mustache out and it like looked kind of funny. And
Yeah.
but I didn't really hear much about, I didn't dive into like how extensively it was changed
Mhm.
after Snyder left. So, or after he wasn't involved. So yeah, I don't know. I want to talk about that for a second.
Yeah, sure. So there was a trailer that came out initially when Zach was still like attached to the project, and it was pretty much tonally the same as Batman versus Superman. Like it was really dark. There was a lot of action sequences, really good CG moments. I think particularly there was like a few specific scenes that didn't end up making it into the theatrical release. Like Cyborg had like a full face mask at one point in the trailer. They showed
Mm,
Flash and Iris West were in the trailer. Victor Stone, Cyborg as like a football player. All of that got chopped out. It was basically all of the other superheroes' somewhat origin stories that were included in there. And
hmm
yeah, once Zack Snyder left, they brought in Joss Whedon, who had some experience directing the Avengers movies, solely for the purpose of making it a lighter tone and adding some humor in there. But what we ended up getting was something that was like half the time of the original movie and full of like forced jokes and kind of
mm,
in some ways, like for instance, one of my fiance's favorite superheroes is Wonder Woman, and what she loves so much about the movie is just like the strength of the women that were in it. And then you watch Justice League, and there's a part where Flash like falls on top of her, and they made like a funny moment out of that. But even something as little as that kind of like objectified her, and my fiance hated it. She was like, "That's not what Wonder Woman's about. It was forced. Like it didn't need to be in there, you know." And then the other big one was just Batman cracking jokes every 5 seconds. You're like,
Hmm.
I don't envision this happening. Like back to the good old days when the Justice League cartoon was out and on the air. You got that Batman who's like hardly ever cracks a smile, is super level all the time, super sure of himself. And then you've got the Joss Whedon version of Ben Affleck's Batman that's just like kind of a joke and he doesn't do anything throughout the entire battle. So I'm excited to see that. That's a good segue into like Ben Affleck coming back as Batman. We're gonna have two versions of Batman out next year.
Yeah, that's a big deal.
Yeah, so I'm super excited for the Batman with Robert Pattinson. But
Yeah, me too. Everything that I've seen about that, I've been at first I was like, probably like many people, was like, oh right, the guy from Twilight. And then once I saw like some photoshopped together kind of like concept art about, before they'd actually released anything about what his suit was going to look like or anything, I was like, okay, I could see this. And so now I'm a lot more excited and on board from everything that I've seen. I hope that they're going to do a really good job with it, and it looks like they will.
Yeah, for sure.
But going back for just a second, I'm excited too because that tone kind of change that then we were given as Justice League in the theaters, it was kind of that more like lighthearted, cracking jokes kind of thing. It did kind of feel weird in like while watching it, because even just like the trailers for the movie and everything, it was just like this, it's kind of like, like Justice League, because the Marvel Cinematic Universe and all that stuff and everything that DC has really done in terms of film and all that have always been very different. And I think that because the Marvel Cinematic Universe has been so successful and all this stuff, obviously there's going to be some people at DC who are like, maybe we should do some things that are more like what they're doing. And, so I get it. But also, looking back to like The Dark Knight, right? Which I consider one of my all-time favorite superhero movies. I mean, that movie's just epic. Like, there are some funny moments in it, but not because they're trying to be funny or because they're like trying to be this kind of like lighthearted joking. Like, it's a very serious, very real kind of, this is what it would actually be like in a city where this kind of thing was going on. And so it feels a lot more like real, and it feels a lot more, whereas like the Avengers kind of feels almost like this other world kind of thing. And that works for them. But for DC and everything that they've done, it has always been this kind of darker, more serious tone. And that's one thing that I really enjoy about DC and their movies, is just that like sometimes that's just the kind of movie that you want to watch. And so Justice League, I will be excited to see what could probably be more of what we expected in terms of tone from the movie, rather than this kind of forced, actually let's make this more humorous. And Batman, who like just had this struggle in Batman versus Superman and all this, there's like a lot going on, and now he's like cracking jokes and everything all over the place. It's like, that's not really Batman. I don't know, that's not really his style. He's usually the one who's the straight face, and people crack jokes at him, and then he doesn't respond, and it's funny because he doesn't, it's like, that's more what you expect from Batman. So it'll be fun to see how that kind of was probably originally meant to be, and how we're going to see that there. I'm excited for that.
Yeah, that's something that I also really loved about DC from the get-go, even before they started doing the DCEU, was everything was like tonally different, and you could see it really existing at any time period. They keep adapting to the change of the culture, and it's cool to see the different iterations of that. So that was another thing too I was excited to see. With the original concept for the Batman movie was going to be with Ben Affleck and him younger and his experiences, because I feel like they kind of started to flesh out Batman in Batman versus Superman, but the reason that a lot of people didn't like it is because, well, obviously, even though in other movies he has killed plenty of people, he was like explicitly killing people in that movie and wanted to kill Superman, and they set it up really well to explain why he's like that. But then Ben Affleck had to step down as Batman, and now we're not going to really get an answer to that question. Like they hinted at it with showing Robin's suit, but we still don't know. I think Zack Snyder said something along the lines of that in his version, Dick Grayson is the Robin that got killed by Joker.
So do we know when exactly this is coming out or being released, or is it being released as just on HBO Max?
Yeah, there's not like an official release date yet. They just said 2021. There's been a few rumors about that, but I can't remember those dates. But yeah, it'll be at least starting off strictly on HBO Max. I'm keeping my fingers crossed that they're going to put it out on DVD, because I'm old-fashioned.
Yeah,
I like to have the physical movie collection. Yeah, they're I think as far as story goes, they're actually, because Steppenwolf was like one of the main generals in Darkseid's army. He was supposed to be like, he was supposed to have much smaller of a role, He was even supposed to be the villain in the Suicide Squad movie, but they ended up chopping that because the studio stepped in. Don't know why. Yeah, so then Steppenwolf became the main villain for Justice League, but originally it was supposed to be like all those flashbacks that they showed of Steppenwolf conquering Earth with the Atlanteans and the Amazons and those guys. That was originally supposed to be Darkseid, and they would have mentioned Steppenwolf as like his general. But
do you know what the deal is with like the studio, and how did they decide that they were going to release this cut? And is it all like, has everyone given the thumbs up in terms of the studio, and or is it kind of they're just kind of throwing this out there because people wanted it?
Yeah, the studio, I'm not entirely sure on that. Warner Bros. Hasn't really made any official statements about it, but they are the ones pouring the budget into it. I think they're going to be spending like an extra upwards of $30 million to finish this. But it's because the fans spoke out. It's because they made this movement of release the Snyder Cut that just kept persisting ever since the original movie came out. And shout out to Zack Snyder for like making passive aggressive posts on his social media platform about it, because that also just fueled the fans more and more. The studio listened, and this isn't the first time something like this has happened. There's been plenty of other movies that Warner Bros. Has put out that after the fans pushed, they would release the director's cut on DVD or something like that. So,
well, hey, good on them, because yes, especially with directors and big studios and all this, it can be hard with the director has this one vision about things, but the studio kind of has final say, and so they get to kind of and so then as fans, sometimes it's like, oh, well, you heard about this thing that the director was doing and it was great, so like as a fan, you can kind of be split sometimes. And so it's, so I'm glad that they are deciding to do this up and release it.
Another thing too, when Justice League was still in like post-production before it came out in theaters, Jason Momoa, who plays Aquaman, posted a picture of himself as Aquaman on his Instagram, and it said something along the lines of like "Unite the Seven," which you watch the movie and you're like, there's only 6 of them. So who was the 7th supposed to be? We had Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, the Holy Trinity, so to speak, and then you had Flash, Aquaman, and Cyborg. I don't know why I blanked on that. And then you're like, oh, it's only 6. Well, Zack Snyder released a storyboard that was supposed to be a key scene in Justice League of General Swanwick. He was in Man of Steel. He was the general that Superman interacted with.
Okay.
It was him.
Is he supposed to be Martian Manhunter?
Yes.
Oh.
There was a scene of him.
That
like,
would be awesome.
He was like looking in the mirror, and then he changes into Martian Manhunter, and you're like, whoa, big reveal. And then it adds a new light to like the scene where they're looking at each other through the glass in Man of Steel in the interrogation room, the 2 last of their race looking at each other. So it sounds like he wants to make that happen. It sounds like that might be in the movie.
Well, that would be sweet. What would be the deal with the DCEU? And is this supposed to just kind of be like hey, this is just kind of a fun thing that we're releasing, but like or is this supposed to kind of replace the last Justice League movie?
I'd like to think it's supposed to replace it, and I'd also like to think that Warner Brothers is like putting it out there to, this is my opinion, this isn't actually factual, but I would like to think that they're doing this to gauge interest and be like, okay, this is the direction we should take and should have been taking from the get-go. They never like addressed this with Batman versus Superman either. Like, I consider the Ultimate Edition, the extended cut, to be canonical over the theatrical release.
It makes a lot more sense.
Yeah.
When you watch the extended edition, there were several things that I was like, oh, wow, okay, good to know. I completely did not get that when watching the normal version. That would be sweet. And I think that makes a lot of sense, right? It's like, in a way, they're kind of correcting what some people might look at as like a mistake or something, trying to go this one direction that was different from kind of all the past DC stuff and what kind of people look forward to in DC. And so, yeah, I think it would make sense that they kind of, this is canon now and we'll go from here kind of a thing. I don't know. I'm not one of those people who's like hugely like, oh, they have to stick to exactly what, and they have to clean it up and they want to kind of change things around, then I'm fine with that, as long as it's a better story and it's more enjoyable to watch and to rewatch, right? You want a movie, in any case, you want a movie that you want to go back to, and you want to watch again.
I have a lot of hope for that, just especially because of the Joker movie proved that DC characters have so much depth to them that you can make an entire movie about one person, even if it's not entirely comic book accurate. and it makes as much money as it did, because the studio really cares about the money. And whether or not Batman versus Superman got good reviews, it made over $1 billion. Whether or not Justice League got good reviews, it still made like over $1 billion. They have the means to keep making it, but also at the same time, they're now aware by making the Snyder Cut and releasing it that if the fans aren't on board, then it's dead in the water.
Yeah, definitely. I've grown up watching shows about Batman and watching shows about, there are these key characters like Justice League animated shows and all that. It has been really like fleshed out over time, it seems. Yeah, I don't know. The DC characters, and right, Joker just proved this, have so much in terms of story that they have to offer. I think that that's part of why people loved Wonder Woman, was just, it was so rich in story. You actually felt for Wonder Woman, and it was a really kind of human and very personal like movie, even though it was about this peculiar circumstance and strange world kind of, and but it still felt like very human, and people really related to it, versus something like Captain Marvel in the MCU, where they kind of have this back and forth between the MCU and the DCEU, but it's like Captain Marvel was a pretty good movie, but it lacked kind of a lot of that human depth, I think, or at least for me. I didn't connect as much with the characters. I connected with the characters that were throwback characters like Nick Fury, but like I didn't really feel for her, so it was like that's one thing that DC has always been great at, is having really solid characters that really good at telling not just action scenes and whatever, but you really do connect with the characters and feel for the characters.
Well, that about covers it for the Snyder Cut. I'm sure more news will be coming out over time, and maybe we can
definitely
do it when it does. There's a lot to look forward to.
All the things to look forward to.
As bad as this year has been, 2021 will be 10 times better. So into the stop motion project. This is a lot more your area as far as like technicalities and stuff like that.
Yeah, so to talk a bit more about this stop motion project that Jake and I had the idea years ago. We're both Batman fans, and I was working on these little stop motion animated projects, and he was working on some projects, and we were kind of just like having fun with all of that. And I'm not as good at like coming up with a story of that kind of stuff, but I love like shooting things with stop motion animation and kind of pushing the envelope with like what I'm comfortable with and what do I know how to do and all that. So we kind of had this idea years ago of like, what if we kind of collaborated and made this Batman stop motion thing? Like what would that kind of be like? And we both talked about it a bit and got a bit excited about it, but it was however many years ago. We were in high school and nothing came much of it for a little while. And Jake, that was when you started collecting the Batman like action figures and all this different things. And so it was kind of like, all right, we kind of thinking of things, and okay, we could do this, and we could finally just, what if we like actually did this? We're both a bit older now and kind of have like our own money to spend on doing this. So we started brainstorming about what would this be, and I started doing some like practice shots with action figures and animating with action figures. I've always loved stop motion, but action figures and doing all that was new to me. Moving them in a way that could actually look real and look feasible. It's very different from something like Legos, which I did most of earlier in my stop motion career, I suppose. So we were kind of like, all right, what if we actually made this into a thing? So you actually came up with a bit of like an opening scene for like a project that like I've been thinking about and that kind of stuff. And I read that and was like, this is awesome. This is something that I'd want to see as a Batman fan. I think we should totally do it. And so we kind of from then started meeting a little bit more regularly and talking about, all right, where do we want this to go? Like, do we want this to just be like a little short film type thing, or do kind of more of like a series kind of a thing? Or what is it? Are we going to go off of existing Batman stuff? Are we going to is this going to be a completely new story? Is it going to be like parodies? We kind of had this idea of let's make our own new branch of like a Batman story that's almost one of those like what if scenarios. And we both really enjoy those. I know, Jake, you've talked to me about how those are some of your favorite Batman stories of just like, what if
Batman in the Victorian era. I was just watching
yeah, exactly.
Gotham by Gaslight. It's really awesome.
Yep, that was one. I couldn't remember the title of it, so I didn't say it, but yeah, that's what I thought of. It was like, yeah, what if Batman took place all of these years ago and then boom, they made an animated movie about it. Those kind of what if scenarios are lots of fun. So that's kind of what we were talking about. So we've met a good handful of times about that and kind of have an idea of the direction we want to go. We want to kind of make multiple episodes to kind of start out with a bit of a mini series that would be going with this kind of story that we're coming up with, and it's kind of evolving a bit, but we have kind of a general idea for where it's going, and we're working more and more on planning all that out. Then yeah, shoot it and edit it and the whole 9 yards, and then release it out for everyone to enjoy. I think it'll be lots of fun to make. We don't have like a strict schedule yet, like a timeline yet of like what we want to do with things. Up until recently have been mostly just kind of like, all right, doing it when we can and when we're more feeling like it and all that stuff. But as we've kind of been meeting a bit more about it, been like, all right, cool, let's work on this a bit more. We're like, all right, sweet, we should, this will be lots of fun to do. It's kind of given us an excuse to hop to it.
So basically, if you've made it this far in the video, go follow us on Instagram, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and get the word out, because we wanna make this for you guys, for the fans, and to make it just explode, because it's something we really care about a lot. Like Noah was just saying, we've been working on it for a while.
I hope that you guys are just as excited about it as I am and as Jake is, because I love Batman. I love stories about Batman. I love Batman's my favorite superhero and has been for forever. I think it'll be lots of fun, geared towards Batman fans, made by Batman fans.
A funny story about how I started to come up with the story. It's kind of a mixture of the Injustice storyline, where like Superman goes off the deep end, heroes kind of like aren't really a thing. It's a mixture of that with like aspects of The Dark Knight Returns, and particularly like not even super long clip. It was like a credit audio clip during Arkham City that some of you might be familiar with. When you play as Catwoman in the DLC, you have two choices at the end of the DLC. You either save Batman or you abandon him. And if you choose to abandon him, there's this whole dialogue of Oracle talking about how Joker's overrun Gotham and yada yada yada. So that gives you like somewhat of an idea of what the story's like, but it's really not going to be like any one of those too much. It's going to be kind of original. The inspiration for this story came to me when I was listening to Radioactive by Imagine Dragons back in high school.
Nice.
The song that everybody loved and everybody listened to and got overplayed. This came out of it, so I'm hoping it takes off and that you guys like it.
So keep your eyes open for things to come, and we'll keep you updated as we're making things and working on things, and trying not to spoil too much, but also get people excited about it.
I think we're gonna wrap it up. Thank you so much for taking the time to call, Noah, and talk about this stuff. Yeah. And for all you guys watching, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel to stay updated on more stuff we're working on, and we'll just get it out as we can so you guys can see new content and whatnot. Let us know what you thought in the comments. If there's any bit of news that we might have missed that you guys have heard about, or any rumors that you've heard, please feel free to share below in the comments. We'd love to hear it. We might even shout you out in the next video. Remember, everybody, the night is always darkest before the dawn, and the dawn is coming. We'll see you guys in the next video.